I'd like to introduce John Beeskow of CBI.
Thank you very much, Matt, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a real quick overview of our agenda. I'm going to introduce CBI and a little bit about where we see FireMon fitting into an overall information security program. Then I'll turn it over to Nate Tenborg from FireMon to give his presentation today. CBI is a IT risk management company. Our sole focus is helping our customers protect their data, their intellectual property, their reputation, and their brand. The slide on the screen today is, or right now, is our primary slide when we're talking with our clients. We take a very holistic, programmatic view of working with our customers, helping them really evaluate their IT risk and helping them identify the appropriate controls to put in place to balance their IT risk with their overall business risk objectives. We do this with both services and with products. The orange and the green wings on the bottom half of this slide represents our services area. The orange are our people and process, so we can help develop security policies, security programs, and align those with common frameworks and control sets. The green side is our technical testing. So we're focusing on the technology here. We can do penetration tests, vulnerability assessments, actually testing the controls that we help you put in place on the orange side. And this blue area is really the traditional defense in-depth product stack. Prior to joining CBI, I was the Chief Information Security Officer of a bank that's headquartered here in the Detroit area. And this is a slide similar to this that I would often use when talking with our executive leadership and our board of directors. We would talk about how you had to have security at multiple layers as you're trying to go after and protect your company. As I work with our clients today, one of the first things that I ask them is usually, do you have a firewall? And that's really kind of met with a half laugh of course we do. Everyone's got a firewall, probably multiple firewalls. They've been around for many, many years. It's one of those pieces of technology that's kind of a given now. My follow-up question is always, that's great. How many rules are in your firewall? And that's usually met with a snicker of some sort or some sort of sly grin. The rule sets just continue to grow and grow and grow. And the longer that the firewalls are in place, the messier and the more convoluted the rule sets tend to get. Unless you go through a complete overhaul, maybe a conversion from one platform to another, it's very rare that I find a company that's really got their arms around every one of their rules, have good documentation around the business need for those rules, identified who an owner is, and is really going back and making sure that those rules are still effective and needed. This is really where FireMon comes into play. And I'm very excited and happy to have Nate and his team here today to talk about their solution and how it fits into this overall stack. So I'll turn it over to Nate.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. Nate Tenborg here with FireMon. Just a really brief introduction kind of around our company here. We were founded back in 2004. We're headquartered in beautiful Overland Park, Kansas. It's kind of strange for a tech company, right? But we are actually a global company. We have locations here in the States and over in Europe and Australia, China, South America. We consider ourselves a global leader in policy and risk management. In fact, we pretty much invented this space back in 2004. We have plenty of large enterprise customers, over 1,000 enterprise, government, and managed service customers. And we handle hundreds and thousands of devices under our solution here. So, what we're planning on covering today is how we can help control the firewall sprawl and, the overall complexity of your policies with your environment. We're going to try to answer some of those problems that you have with some of your people too, handling that problem of, having too many cooks in the kitchen, or how do we respond to some of these mistakes that administrators make, or quite frankly, how do we prevent some of those mistakes? And a lot of that's going to be done through better process, right? So getting better visibility across your entire organization and, working towards automating that whole compliance section. But let's start off here real briefly with what we kind of see as the current state of firewalls today. It's no lie, it's kind of John mentioned there that, most firewalls are so poorly managed that they really end up becoming a security liability. You guys probably have plenty of firewall rules that you have, quite frankly, no visibility or understanding of, the necessity. Are these still necessary? Why are they there? There's been a lot of talk, though, in the past that maybe, the firewall is dead. There's been some security staffers out there claim the firewall is dead. Well, the reality is we've done personally here at FireMon some surveys, some customers and some prospects. Where do you see the criticality for your network firewalls? How critical do you see these within your organization? We found 96% of all the respondents responded that either firewalls were as critical or even more critical than they've ever been. Let's talk about what firewall vendors have done. First of all, managing security from that single point is always still preferred. It's time-tested strategy. If we can avoid the old swivel chair syndrome, everything's going to be better off. Understanding that, firewall vendors saw this need and they started to fill it, with things like adding in, deeper packet inspection, application filtering, and, integrating these controls that are working above, layer 3. That in turn created end users seeing that need and purchasing it. Nobody wants to be breached. If I can, simplify this as an organization, that's going to decrease the ability for me to get breached or et cetera. But everyone also wants these fun new toys. And with that comes some additional challenges, though, right? These challenges, whether we're talking about, these next generation firewalls or just your standard old firewall that's been around for years, the same challenges really still exist. Of the 100 organizations that we surveyed, asking what those main challenges they have as far as firewall management in their organization, their top answers were too complex. I've got too many rules. I don't understand what I'm allowing. I've got gaps in my enforcement. I don't understand my policy changes. When a policy changes, as rules get added or removed, well, likely not removed, as rules get added or changed, what is the impact of that? What's the reason? Who is the owner of this rule? And then understanding, am I compliant? Am I compliant with industry standards like PCI, HIPAA, NIST, whatever it might be that you guys have to follow, but as well as even your own internal security policy standards and compliance. Speaking around, those changes, it's no question that, these configuration errors are going to account for the largest fraction of your network outages. And as networks and policies become more complex, that only increases the risk of configuration errors. So what are some of the causes of complexity within networks? Unused unnecessary rules. Those rules that went in, years ago might have been for a system that no longer exists or a system that, was going through a POC or something that was being tested with the idea, we're going to go out and remove this. Never got done. Overall number of rules and devices, a lot of that's because these rules were put in so long ago and nobody's gone back and checked them. But as you continue to grow that policy, the complexity, of course, increases, meaning that I have a less visibility into actually where my security sits within my organization. Lack of process. I've unfortunately been involved in far too many conversations with prospective customers and people and organizations. That change management process is poor. We're talking about, maybe Excel spreadsheets being passed around or, changes that take sometimes upwards of a month, 6 weeks to actually come in. Also, a total lack of visibility and no real understanding of whether or not we're having changes come into my environment that haven't even gone through any sort of formal approval process or given any sort of justification. To build on to that, all these new technologies, that gets back to those new toys pieces. All these new technologies being brought into the environment are also additionally creating more and more working complexity on your side. And then the further and always growing compliance sphere, PCI is always growing out what they want for their compliance. Boards are starting to look more and more on, are you guys compliant? Where, security in the past kind of was thrown to the back burner. It's becoming much more prevalent, even from a board level, to push this down. Nobody wants to be in the news, right, for the latest breach. It costs you guys millions and millions of dollars when stuff like that happens. So for, to add some actual perspective to this, infrastructures are always continuously growing. We're adding, we've already got hundreds of devices deployed, thousands of rules and objects. You might be scanning hundreds of thousands of hosts. Meanwhile, you have very poor security enforcement on this. And as they continue to grow, that only gets worse. Because it's growing and you have, really not a good way to understand this, you really suffer from a poor visibility. I don't know where my gaps might be. I don't know what my security posture is. What is my firewall allowing? That's a question a lot of times that you can ask somebody, and they'll give you that funny look, and well, they hope that I'm not allowing anything that I shouldn't be, but they really don't understand. Without looking at that, and the vendors really, quite frankly, haven't responded to this from a firewall perspective to help people understand exactly, what's being allowed and disallowed within my environment. Because those native management tools that, the vendor provides really do fall short in a lot of these areas. And then, of course, dreaded audit and compliance. It is incredibly painful. Documentation lacks in pretty much every organization. There is no documentation on the rules, or it's completely poor, or it might be documentation that's for information that was from years and years ago. That rule doesn't even serve that same purpose anymore. Your best case scenario is to do periodic policy review, but when you've got hundreds of thousands of rules and policies within an organization, that's a full-time job a lot of times to do that in a manual scenario. And it's really ineffective due to that overall complexity that happens within organizations. And then there's the great old human challenges. You got different people managing the same system. The reality is, as we all know, there's a significant deficit as far as employees to the number of jobs that are available in this industry. It's around 8% last figures I saw. So really what you have is you have people, jumping from job to job, or you've got people, moving on from different jobs. So you're always having different people managing that same system over time, or even at that same time. And really what that allows for is those human failures, those technical mistakes that are creating, hidden or shadowed rules. As rules continuously get added in to an environment, someone requests access, oftentimes there's not really any checking of, do I already have this access met, A? Or B, is there access in my environment that's pretty similar that I've just got to go make a quick tweak to a particular rule to actually allow this access? So what ends up happening is new rules get added continuously, and sometimes those rules get dropped to the top of the policy or the bottom of the policy. What this really ends up having, though, is technical mistakes. What do I mean by technical mistakes? Those hidden, those shadowed rules, those unnecessary rules that are in my environment because I already have this access met somewhere. That's another area that the firewall vendor, quite frankly, has fallen short for the most part. Those firewalls are going to let you put any sort of rule you want into the rule base without doing, that sanity check of, is this necessary? Do I already have this met? And all that does is increase and bloat your firewall policy. Some of the other human challenges are, unfortunately, they haven't invented the magic pill that allows us all to not get sick, or, that everybody needs a vacation. We all do get a little sick and tired of work from time to time, even when we have the greatest job ever, right? And, there's always also those additional responsibilities. There's life outside of work, right? We all try to have some sort of work-life balance. Industry is not always the easiest when you get those 2 o'clock in the morning phone calls, right? But you got to have some sort of work-life balance. So, we've all got your family or friends that taking some time for yourselves. So what happens when you've got to take work off for something like, say, having a baby, right? And you leave that you leave your task of, creating potentially new rules within an organization to someone else. Well, what do you end up coming back with is, unfortunately, having stuff like this strung across, multiple devices on the network because, there's not really an understanding of what I'm allowing, or how to actually grant access for something. So you end up with these dreaded innies. I see these far too often. Everybody's guilty of it. Hopefully I don't always see it like this where it's, any, but very often you see those roles of an any in the service column, right? Where everyone's guilty of that. It's, hey, I'm testing something. I don't know exactly what this application uses, for example. So can you just stick an any on it? We'll go clean it up later. Or, hey, I've got to get access to this going today. There's a business driver for this access today. I don't have time to actually delve into what this access is. Just open up access. I need to get this working right now, with the assumption that we're going to go back and clean it up. Unfortunately, that very rarely happens. Additionally, it's a challenge once something like this is in your firewall. How do I understand what I need to clean this up as? If operations isn't telling me what's being used on this role, how do I actually have to go back and look at that? Well, one way is let's start looking at actually what's passing through that firewall. Let's look at what's actually passing through that particular rule in my environment, and let's break that out into a logical manner of understanding. So we'll talk about this here later on in the presentation, but keep this in the back of your mind. This is something that I see all the time. And, when you start talking about audits, right, and whether we're talking internal or external auditors, when they find these, that's something they're going to blow you up about. So with that visibility, I can understand, will this change break anything as far as compliance? Are they asking for an any, or are they asking for, say some protocols, trying to allow FTP into my environment, for example, and then give you some metrics around that. Will this change expose some additional risk to my environment? Make it very human readable, right out in front of you. What does this potentially violate? What are the things that I need to look at in my organization to understand, should I grant this access ahead of time? So you really need to make sure that your system is integrated with your existing change management systems. I have to have some sort of correlation with, is this necessary? Avoid the good old swivel chair syndrome of having to jump into 12 different systems. Let's have that one single pane of glass to understand, what does this change look like? Is it necessary? What's the impact of it? And then let's go bang it out if necessary. And then it also helps, make sure that everyone stays informed of where the request is in the process. Is this going to be approved, or do I need to actually come back and redesign this particular change that I'm requesting? Well, what we have is a workflow scenario. It's very customizable that takes that same pieces of information. I understand the policies of your devices as they sit today. I understand what your compliance drivers are, whether I need to be, where my PCI compliance stands, and maybe I need to have some HIPAA compliance areas, or, I've got to look at Sarbanes-Oxley, or whatever those might be as far as from an industry standpoint, or even internally, what those internal security process and compliance standards that you're trying to implement. And let's build that in to a workflow system that's going to allow me to take those change requests, okay? And I can take those change requests and give you that intelligent design. Design that automatically for you, show you whether or not it's necessary, where does that need to go. Additionally, build upon that and say, what's the impact of that? But the great part about our workflow system here is I'm not, saying that I have to take over as your one-stop solution for, requests within an organization. I integrate with all your various pieces, your network devices and any existing change management system, and I give you the flexibility to really customize how this needs to look for your organization. Whether or not we need to have different people touch depending upon where the request comes from. Our workflow system is used by large numbers of the customers within that we serve, and even some of the largest MSSPs out in the world. If you guys are shopping any of your change management out to some of those large MSPs, they're probably using our workflow on the back end to help handle that and understand, is this necessary? Where does this need to go? And depending upon who's granting or who's requesting this, who needs to handle this task? We'll click happy here apparently. But that also gets around understanding of, permissions and access, and what are those business requirements? Oftentimes when you get those ticket requests, those requirements are very poorly defined, if defined at all. Very limited information. Heck, they might even not have IPs in there half the time, or when you've got to do those large network changes, where I'm looking to say, and I'm spinning up a new data center, it becomes very difficult to scope and define those accurately. Maybe I'm doing a switchover from one vendor to another. So with that limited information, that really results in much broader access than is actually required. And that's what the security administrators are trying to do their best to limit that access, but without really solid, good information, it becomes a very difficult task. That from to, are we talking what port, what's the application, or who are the users? And really that end becomes, I've been alluding to that dreaded any object all the time in organizations. I find this. And really what we should be doing is everything possible to follow that principle of least privilege. You can't always trust the application owner to know what that application is going to use. So what we can do is, once again, look at what's actually flowing through that application help you discover what is least privilege. Let's lay it out in a manner that's easily humanly readable for you. Here are the exact ports and the associated applications. And, here's my sources and destinations. Here's the exact flow of these packets in my environment. That's going to allow me to come back and restructure where we find these overly permissive rules in my environment to lock them down specifically to access that they need and nothing else. It is an incredibly powerful tool when you start looking at exactly what's flowing through here. I don't have to go set up a PCAP on this anymore and let it run forever and then throw it into maybe a spreadsheet and try to sort through all that data manually. It becomes a very nightmarish process, hours upon days upon work to actually get this accomplished, manually. The system like our tool here, it's a couple of clicks of a button. Here's exactly what's flowing through this rule. Here are those relationship flows that are happening within my environment. Along looking at usage, though, and rules, I wish that we could I could give a quick survey out here, but I doubt many, if anybody on this phone call really has true rule management, life cycle management within their organization. It's very difficult with, existing vendor tools or existing tools in an organization to understand, when a rule actually needs to be reviewed or whether or not this rule has been used, especially when you look across multiple platforms, very rarely is vendor, has one single sole vendor in their environment. I've got Checkpoint, I've got Cisco, I've got Palo Alto, I've got Fortinet, whatever in my environment. I've got a big spread of different devices in my environment. It becomes very difficult to track that usage across all these different platforms. So you're always getting these requests for creating new access in my environment. But when that application's no longer in use, or that server's role is completely changed, you don't get that email saying, hey, will you pull that rule that you created for me 6 months ago out? Or, that rule that was there for 2 years ago for, Joe in accounting for his own specific thing that he's no longer with this organization here. There isn't that management to go understand that I need to go pull those out, So we like to call, firewalls more like the Roach motels, right? The rules check in, but they never check out. Yeah, I know, it's corny, right? So, what are some of your best practices to get around this? If you've got a tool that can help automate rule review, ideally, those reviews should be done by that business or application owner and not the firewall team. If I can say, hey guys, I've got all these rules that are associated with you. Are these still necessary? Are you still using these? They can give you the yes or no, right? I don't have to spend all this time manually going through this. And, scheduling this review annually is best at the least, but really, when you look at things like PCI, right, I'm supposed to be doing this every 6 months. Rarely do I actually find people that are capable of spending that time, from the firewall team perspective to do this manually. So if I can use a tool to help identify, where some of these unused rules or objects and rules are happening, that's going to also help, slim down the amount of time that we're spending on review. I don't exactly have to go back to the application owner on this. If I have seen that this rule hasn't been used in, a year and a half, right? Let's go pull this out. It's obviously unnecessary. With a tool like ours, we're covering and we're tracking that usage all over time, And I'm not relying on hit counters specifically because hit counters are not infallible, right? I can go reset those hit counters, for example, really easy. I can log in and reset the hit counters. But secondly, they don't go to that granular level that I'm talking about. Those object and usage members, right? So those members of a group object, for example, have they been used in the construct of this rule? Or even when I get down, as I was talking previously about those any rules. Yeah, I know the rule has been used, but what within that rule has actually been used? How do I go back and restructure or reframe that particular rule? One of the easiest things of all is to remove those technical mistakes from your policies. Those rules that are never going to be used because they're either hidden or shadowed by other rules in the policy. Happens all the time. Those are those low-hanging fruit pieces. Really easy to identify, and you're going to have zero negative impact removing them. This is a day one activity with a tool like ours. Give me your configuration, your firewall, and I will show you in a matter of seconds exactly where these low-hanging fruit pieces are. Large rule sets often have, 20+% of these rules being hidden or shadowed, and quite frankly, I've seen it be monumentally worse than 20%. I've been with this company for far too long. I've got a lot of war stories as far as large rule sets, but the latest example I saw was just a few weeks ago. Customer had 200,000 lines in their ACLs for a Cisco device. Of those 200,000 lines, once I ran a quick hidden rules report, looking to see where these hidden and shadowed pieces are, I was finding that nearly 50% of that rule base was completely unnecessary. So you think of a rule base that's that bloated in the first place, there's a lot of problems you're running into there. That firewall is going to be taxed at all times, tipping over to the point where, we're probably thinking we're going to have to get new hardware for this. Well, let's look, if I'm looking and seeing where are some of these pieces that I can clean up, that's going to save us time and money in the end run here. Anybody who's a firewall admin on here probably, when, management comes down and says, hey, I need you to give me some reports, on our firewalls. And, hey, where are some of my gaps in enforcement? Or tell me, am I allowing X in my environment? Where those are, it really becomes a nightmare. It's something that keeps people up at night, unfortunately. Because system admins, hey, we're tech guys here, right? We're tech people. We're not actually report writers, I don't want to have to use my time that could be spent on actually performing functions that are going to help secure my organization doing reports manually. And then especially when you get those, those mixed environments, getting those similar data types, from, say, a Cisco to a checkpoint can be a really impossible task. How do I get all that information kind of in one actual location? And that's because, these native tools that you get from the vendor are bare bones at the very best. You don't even have capabilities a lot of times to track versions. Hey, do I have homogeneous versions across my environment? And, they lack abilities to even find out, hey, do I have like an orphaned object or, unused pieces in my environment? And then, of course, because of this, they really lack the ability to report against, all of the different platforms that you have within your organization. Really, what's kind of some best practices around, reporting? Find a vendor-agnostic solution that can report against all your device types in your environment. Find one that not only does, say, real-time change detection, but automates reporting. That's going to save you time. If I understand, what these changes are happening in my environment, what the impact of those are in real time, that's going to save me time on the back end, right, of having to go back and clean those up. But, that ability to report on your different configurations at different points in time are going to save you that headache when it comes to audit of understanding, what's the necessity for any of these. And then giving you that advanced analytics capabilities, like I've been mentioning, those hidden or shadowed rules or those orphaned objects or, understanding the rule and object usage in my environment. Providing a one location to really serve as a documentation repository for all of the rules in my environment is really going to help you guys as well. And then that traffic flow analysis. Understand exactly what I'm allowing, in my environment. What exactly is this? I've got this any in the service here. What exactly is this application actually using in my environment? And then, this is the part that really drives people nuts, is when we start talking about reporting on compliance, understanding compliance, I think this sentence here is striking. If reporting on firewalls is a nightmare, compliance is an absolute living hell. One slip up is all you need for a breach. And really, compliance is a 24/7, 365 task, right? This is something that we need to be taking into consideration every minute of every day, you know. And if you keep up with the Verizon compliance report, you know, the last one in 2015 came out and it said not a single company that they went through was fully PCI compliant at the time of breach. Not a single one. And then a single data breach, can actually bankrupt some small companies, cost per piece of, personally identifying information is estimated at, $58 to $110. And if you look at what Target just recently settled with MasterCard, just MasterCard alone was $19 million. I mean, that's, and you also look at the impact of what happened there too, they've got a whole new staff there. Really nobody is left from pre-breach. They're all gone. They're all looking for another job. So why not, once again, use a tool that can, there's tools out there that are going to help you in compliance that are really standardized. Why not use one that can be customized for my own organizational goals? Everyone, yes, we've all got to follow some of these industry standards, but everyone has different internal standards that they're going to use. Use a tool that can, actually be customized to your environment, first of all, and then also tracks your environment in real time. As these changes happen, let's find out what those actually, are doing within my environment. And, a tool that can report not just, in one little single piece of my environment, but my entire environment as a whole. Give you some of those metrics allowed to understand, where do I sit as an organization as a whole, or even single pieces. But also, if I can stop these issues from happening before they even happen, let's do that. Find something that can help you model these changes for that impact of what the impact is to compliance before they're actually made. And give me, that uniform reporting structure and any immediate alerts going out to the necessary, parties in my organization in the event that, a change actually breaks something for compliance with my organization. Quickly identify that, send out my alerts, let's go fix it before it causes a bigger headache down the road. And then, quickly identify any of those rules that violate pieces of compliance across my entire environment. Our suite really is going to help provide organizations some real-time visibility into, your device configurations and the change events that are happening within my organization. The who, what, where's, why's have changed. Who changed it? What did they change? Why did they change it? Documentation pieces. And finally, we've actually added recently a new piece to our portfolio called Immediate Insight. With Immediate Insight, we're able to do and provide some real-time data discovery and analysis on all sorts of data types in your environment. Whether we're talking firewall logs, NetFlow data, even down to, emails or any unstructured data that automatically enrich this data to find some of those non-obvious associations. Search this data with kind of a Google natural language search capability, right? And then show you that with, associate that data and cluster it for, some of that big data comparison analytics to find out, where are those unique pieces? If I'm actually, this is great for an incident response part, let's find out, let's get down really quickly into the data of where they're already at and, where do I need to go clean some of this stuff out? Why people choose FireMon? Customers are seeing results. We do a lot of polls here, and 91% of our customers report, measurable improvement in their overall state of their network security policy. Whether that's firewall cleanup or improving operations or increasing compliance. And then, of course, you've always got to validate, hey, am I getting some ROI? And what's my return on investment? Excuse me. And 50% of our customers are coming back to us and saying, hey, we're realizing a total return on their investment within 12 months or less. And, why do they end up turning to FireMon? Well, unfortunately, AI got breached, right? We've had some of these customers that have been in the news that got breached, and, next day they're ringing us up. or they've had, problems, service impact or outages, or, they're trying to prepare for an audit, But the reality is unfortunately, we're all procrastinators in this world. So really, it's not really I'm being ready for an audit. I already failed one. Or, hey, we're acquiring a bunch of new companies. I need to do some validation on their environment before I bring it in. Or the good old platform migration. I'm, going from Cisco Checkpoint or Checkpoint to Palo Alto or whatever that might be. There's always that personnel turnover, or the good old attrition, or people that just really need to get greater insight to their security posture. So thank you guys for your time. I think John's got a few words here. Appreciate you guys' time.
For questions and answers, again, on the screen, you can reach us at CBI Security Strategist at cbihome.com if you've got follow-up questions that you want to have a deeper conversation about what you've heard today and how that might apply within your own environment.
All right, thanks, guys. That was a great presentation. Anybody that attended today, you'll probably receive an email early part tomorrow that will have the webinar on demand, as well as additional materials from this presentation. And I'd like to thank you for attending. Have a nice day.